Hey, Stacy, what's the weirdest graffiti that you've ever seen in a porta-john?
Man, it's so funny you asked that because I actually went down this Reddit rabbit hole as I often do, and I saw that this guy, artistic, I think his name is Artistic Ad 7063. Anyway, he was reflecting on graffiti and porta-johns from his deployment. Uh, and he said, and I quote, "I once read graffiti in the shit house that said infantry, three exclamation points. Everything else is just support." And underneath that graffiti read, uh, it's spelled infantry. That's with an N. You guys do need support. Ha ha ha. But that also got me thinking about some of the graffiti that I saw on my deployments. There was a lot of Chuck Norris
Hmm.
references, a lot of 1-800 Yo Mamas, that kind of stuff. I also was really, really surprised to see one in reference to combat camera chicks, i.e., given that there were only two in country,
I was
that
about to
kind of
say,
that kind of narrowed it
anybody
down.
you know?
Oh wow, not that I know of. But anyway, I'm curious, guys, what is the most memorable Porta John graffiti from your deployments?
Okay, so I have a question. I have to ask, have you guys seen the list of things that Wagner loves? It's a list of one. And I'm not going to say what it is. If you want to know, you'll have to look up Wagner loves United States Marine Corps, and you'll figure out what I'm talking about.
All right.
But it was
Because I
on
don't know what
every
you're talking
porta
about.
john. See, I guess it's just a Marine thing then. And I don't know who Wagner is, but congratulations, sir. Bravo Zulu. So Alpha's well, well, what about you, Adam? Have you seen some pretty juicy?
Well, I kind of with Stacy. I just remember a lot of phone numbers and
Yeah.
porta
Yeah.
johns. Oh,
And I
but
got a
wait,
lot of
I wanted
voicemails.
to reflect on this. So this guy was reflecting on porta john graffiti seen on deployed locations on a Reddit post. So I think that's I think that's funny in and of itself. Like I
Yeah.
can't think how many times I've just been sitting around being like,
I
what?
was
You
on the
know what?
crapper thinking about the
Look,
crapper.
look at all, you know what I miss seeing? All the stuff on the walls when I'm pooping in a hot box downrange.
Well, I mean, not, when you're in the infantry, when you're in the infantry, you don't always have reading material. And it's not like Marines have reading material. It's not like they
Yeah.
even read. So it's,
um,
if you can't,
I'm oh my gosh, I'm Air Force and the Smarty Pants, and of course I am the Thesaurus Rex. I'm always like, do I need to fix this or do I just leave it be? Damn it, I don't have a Sharpie. I guess it's gonna have to ride.
well, I think that there's a lot of good artwork and things like that. Nothing that you just appreciate it in the moment. You take that beautiful artwork, that beautiful, sometimes veiny artwork, and just move on with your life, having been exposed to those things. And it's a special time in all of our lives where you have so much going on that without somebody like, what was this gentleman's name?
Oh,
Artistic
artistic.
Ad 7063. Without somebody like that sitting down, you just gloss over some of that stuff. But so
I
Alphas,
can't.
while you got another one?
Well, I was just gonna say I can't tell you how many times I walked in there and found a weapon that somebody had left behind. A 9
Oh
mil M4. No, that never happened. Okay.
No, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no. What would you
Yeah.
did you try and find the person, or did you just leave it?
Oh, there were some shenanigans played once we
Okay. At
knew
that
least it
had
was
who
to
it was and
in-house.
that
accounted
had to
for.
be an army
Yeah.
officer by the name of Adam Marr.
No, no. I mean once, but
He's
you
like
learn pretty
walking
quick.
around with 7 M4s. He's like, guys, please.
Found these AR-15s
The
and
gift that keeps on giving.
AK-47s and M9s. Whose is it?
Yeah, who's AKs? Like, I feel like the enemy's been using our porta potty. What's going on here?
They heard we had the nicer porties.
Yeah, they're not stacked quite as high. Well, third attempt. So, Alphas, while you ruminate upon your favorite words of washroom wisdom, let's get this show started.
This is the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
They call me crazy cause I'm facing all my giants. They try to scare me into thinking I can fight it. They tell me I should never even think of trying. But that's just me, I'm gonna live out in defiance.
Welcome, Alphas. Thanks for joining us. We have a great show for you today. Our guest today is Jaime Cheshire, Executive Director of the Afghanistan War Commission. We'll get to know Jaime and learn more about the commission, the scope of their work, and how they hope to engage with veterans during this process. But before we get to that, Joe has another Bravo Zulu to share.
Thank you, Adam. I do. So since April is Children and Youth Month, we would be remiss not to celebrate how Legion members support the youth in their communities. So to that end, we're sending out a Bravo Zulu to celebrate hardworking young student, a proud mom, and a Legion post that is out there doing their thing. In a social media comment, Karen Watson, Ms. Wiki, posted, "My son was awarded a scholarship by our local American Legion. We are grateful for that and for the service of all members." I know you don't really sound like that, Karen, but I had to spice it up a little bit. But honestly, amazing. And we do appreciate you. Congrats to you and a Bravo Zulu to your son. We also want to give a shout out to the post who gave the scholarship to you. A little Google sleuthing by super producer Holly, who did not write that line, suggests it might be Plainfield American Legion Marne Post 13 in Illinois. I think that's right? Illinois. Okay, so if this isn't right, please let us know so we can acknowledge the correct post. But we're going to give Post 13 in Illinois a BZ anyway, because they do give out a bunch of scholarships to local kids, which is honestly huge to take care of your local community. That's beautiful. I'm getting soft in my old age because anytime I read anything like this, it gets me a little verklempt. I get a little.
I heard that about you.
I'm a crier. I mean, you've seen me cry. It's it happens.
It's touching. You're in touch with your emotions. That's okay.
I am. I think the problem is I grew up in a beauty shop, number one, and two, I had two daughters first before I got my boys. So I just, so much love and empathy in my house. And I think it did me good in the long run, but there's local posts all over the country, just like Post 13, hopefully Post 13, that give out scholarships and school awards to kids of all ages every year. So make sure you check out with your local post to find out what they may offer. And some departments also offer state level scholarships, which you can find by looking up at your American Legion state headquarters. I think a lot of times there's so many things out there and resources out there that not only are good about assisting you in times of growth and need and things like that, but also to help you become a part of a community. Because I know me personally, and I'm sure that you guys kind of feel the same. When somebody does something for you, when they step up for you, it does two things. It makes you want to be involved, and it makes you want to do for others. Spending time around people who give makes you realize the benefits of giving. So what do you guys think? Do you guys feel like a lot of these resources go untapped and don't get the attention that they deserve?
I think a lot of them suffer from people not knowing about them.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of them that's really important to mention, considering that we're on the footsteps of the Memorial Day holiday, is the national level American Legion Legacy Scholarship, and that's for children of service members who were killed or injured while serving. Yeah. So, Adam, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, I have a little personal anecdote, here recently. So my daughter is 13 and she wants to go to Auburn. We're living in Alabama. And, I just kind of got into the American Legion, joined my post, and started being an active member last year. So I'm kind of learning about a lot of these resources. And I knew that we had boys state. So I just, went in there to start looking at, girl state and some of the different programs and scholarships, that they have. And I think there was an article that just came out recently about an essay contest for kindergarten through 12th grade. And then there's different requirements at different levels. And, I think you win like maybe a $50 award and then a donation to somewhere else. But I told my daughter about it, and we were staying at a hotel for my son's basketball tournament, and it was, 10 o'clock and everybody else was asleep. And she wanted to start writing the essay like that night because she was so excited about it. So I think your point is spot on, Stacy. I think the more that we can share that we have these resources. I was even talking to my post commander, and I was like, hey, how can we get the word out in the community that we can sponsor, some boys to Boy State, and just kind of coming up with a a local little communication strategy to say, hey, we have some resources. We just have to do a better job of sharing that. So I think it's exciting. I think that the youth, once they know about it, want to
Yeah.
do it, as evidenced by my, daughter. I think the local posts want to be more active. They just need a little, push in that direction. And also some posts are doing really great things, like post 13 here in Illinois. So Bravo Zulu, for sure.
Pretty sure that was Illinois, Adam.
Illinois. Making a lot of noise.
No press is bad press. So I'm just trying to, get as much press as possible by mispronunciating as many things as possible.
Line eyes.
So to circle back around though, and to be real, like if you don't utilize these programs, they don't get the attention they deserve. It's as important to use these programs as it is to support these programs. And so, by all means, and you may not even know this, but at the national level, the American Legion Legacy Scholarship for children and service members killed or injured while serving, the Samsung Scholarship for girls and boys state participants, scholarships for other youth programs, participants, and dozens more. And in 2023, with only 67% of post reporting, the American Legion distributed 14.7 million in scholarships.
That's huge. That is huge. Incredible. That's
so
amazing.
If you're wondering where your support towards your American Legion is going, it's helping the community, it's helping service members and families, and it's got a huge impact. And I think that's beautiful. And we'll have links to some of the national scholarships in our show notes, but you can learn more about scholarships available at legion.org/scholarships.
Okay, Alphas, please stick around. We'll be right back after the break to chat with Jaime Cheshire right after the break, in case you didn't know.
The American Legion is raising awareness about PTSD and veteran suicide by offering hope, camaraderie, and support.
Be the one to help end veteran suicide.
Be the one to save one veteran.
Be the one to ask a veteran in your life how they're doing.
Be the one to reach out when a veteran is struggling.
Go to betheone.org and help the American Legion end veteran suicide.
Will you be the one?
All right, Alphas. Today we are very honored and humbled to be joined by the Executive Director of the Afghanistan War Commission, Jaime Cheshire. Jaime, welcome to the Tango Alpha Lima podcast.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Adam. It's great to be here. Thank you for the work that you do on behalf of veterans.
Of course.
Thanks, Jaime. I wanted to start first with just saying, during the 20 years war, you were actually in Afghanistan on several occasions, to include, if I understand correctly, being on the ridge during the 2021 Afghanistan withdrawal in the fall of Kabul. So as someone who's been so close to the war, the soldiers and the people in Afghanistan, did you personally have any difficulty processing what you saw and experienced over there, like so many of the other veterans? And if so, how did you process those lived experiences?
Thank you for that question, Adam. So I was on House Armed Services Committee and took 6 trips into Afghanistan and was on a sabbatical from government service actually in August of 2021. And I was on a ridgeline hiking the Appalachian Trail. It was I had done 12 years of sort of these national security jobs, all desk jobs for the most part, but kept me pretty busy. Part of the post 9/11 generation that worked on national security issues after 9/11. And I was on my sabbatical. I was on kind of my walking off my job, taking some time to reflect. And I was in a very remote section of Maine, finishing up the 2,000-mile hike. And I had very limited comms. And I got the news that Kabul had fallen while sitting on this ridgeline, all by myself in the middle of Maine. And I know you went through similar thoughts on your end, but for me, it was quite shocking, and I felt quite helpless after I think everything people had done to contribute to that mission, to be sitting there without the ability to help our Afghan friends and allies, on that ridgeline, just processing what was happening. And the nice thing about the Appalachian Trail is there are veterans and folks that have worked in national security that are on the trail. And so when I got to camp that night, I found some folks that were also processing and trying to understand what had happened. And so we had a nice little campfire, long discussion into the evening, just trying to figure it out. And that was, I think getting all that news at once it was a lot, and you felt far away from, you know, the ability to help.
Wow.
It's so crazy how veterans find each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I personally, so I'm a civilian. I mean, I served in national security roles, but not in the military. And so mine was as a House Armed Services staffer, I served with almost, you know, all the professional staff on the committee were veterans. A lot of them had 9/11 roles, but we had a lot of Vietnam veterans as well, which is a great, you know, intergenerational mix. And so folks with those similar experiences tend to find each other.
But
Thank
you
you for that,
served.
Jaime.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I mean, despite it being military or not, you fly into Afghanistan 6 times. I don't think there's anybody that's going to argue that you weren't there in service of your country. So
yeah, I appreciate it. It's a public service. I appreciate that.
Well, and I would
also
say the
think,
CIA
like,
is also public service too.
Yeah,
Agreed.
absolutely.
and I would also
Intelligence-
just, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I have a great appreciation for intelligence officers, diplomats, the development officers, and a lot of the non-governmental organizations that worked in Afghanistan as well.
Well, so I'm going to jump in here really quick, Jaime, because thank you for being on the show. And I have a burning question, and it's not really one of my own, but one from my husband, who's an Afghanistan war veteran. And I feel like no matter whatever it is, if it's a documentary about, you know, 9/11, or if it's talking about enduring freedom or Afghanistan, he always brings up Tora Bora. So, you know, but first I want to talk about something a fellow veteran of mine once said. She's Honorable Senator Tammy Duckworth. She's a big proponent of the establishing of this bipartisan Afghanistan War Commission. And I remember her saying, and I'm paraphrasing, if we don't look at the role of all government agencies involved in the Afghan conflict, then we will be doomed to repeat past mistakes. So I wanted to preface my Tora Bora comment with that in saying, now that we're at the beginning of this commission, this study, and you're spearheading everything, I'm going to throw my husband's question at you. Will you guys be looking into why we stopped short of Tora Bora, why we didn't pursue UBL, and end the war right away?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Senator Duckworth was one, as you know, one of the combat veterans in Congress that really pushed hard for stand up of the commission, among a lot of members of the 4-country caucus in the House, including Jason Crow, Todd Young, others in the Senate. And one of the things in this August 2021 to October 2021 time period that they really wanted to emphasize, in the mandate that they gave us, was this needs to look back at all 4 presidencies and over the decisions and inflection points throughout the 20 years of the war. And some of those key early decisions are really critical in the trajectory of the war. So our mandate begins in June 2001 in the Bush administration, and the decisions related to Osama bin Laden and the original decision to go into Afghanistan to disrupt, defeat Al-Qaeda, prevent the safe haven. That's all important questions for this study. We are going to do interviews and request, proprietary government documents and archival research to try to unpack some of those decisions now that we have the full 20-year perspective to look back. And importantly, the job is to extract the lessons that we can all use going forward. So we see we have 16 bipartisan appointed commissioners. The commissioners on this commission really see the extracting the key lessons and answering the American public's questions about the war as the key deliverable. And we are going to write a report. It is due in 2026, and it is going to go through those moments in a very narrative form, those key decisions all the way back to pursuing UBL at Tora Bora, and look at those key inflection points and try to show what was going on behind the scenes, and what went into those inflection points and decisions, and tell the story, and then extract from that lessons for future conflicts and future interventions that we're going to face.
First of all, I love having you here. I'm super excited about this. This is, the more I read into this, the more I wanted to read into it, but I didn't want to get so far into it that that I wasn't going to let you explain it to me much better, because what happens in the military is we tend to think in PowerPoint. So I just wanted to clarify to you that if you're planning on compiling this information into a PowerPoint, please find another way. Please find another way.
Yeah.
So the Afghanistan War Commission is to develop a series of lessons learned and recommendations for the way forward that will inform future decisions by Congress and policymakers throughout the United States. So I love that the goal here is to learn from our successes and our struggles. Some call those failures. I don't do that. But what are ways to implement this without using PowerPoints? But no, seriously, how do we know when it's time to look at this information? At what point in a struggle, when as tensions rise, whether it be, China or Russia or Ukraine, whatever it is that we're dealing with, at what point do we say it's time to look at the mistakes we made and the successes we had in this 20-year war? How do we utilize this information? It seems broad, but I guess what I'm really asking is, at what point do we know, hey, it's time to really look at this and use this information again when we get to the point where we have it ready?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so stepping back in terms of our scope, it's very broad, Joe. So they've asked us to look at not only the military aspects of the war, but the diplomatic intelligence, the development piece, NATO, and the key regional actors as well. And while it's that broad mandate can be, long conversations, intimidating about the scale, what it really allows us to do is allows us to pick what we think are those key moments, those key inflection points, somewhat driven by research and data, and making sure that there's integrity to that process. So we're not just doing hypothesis testing. We all kind of have a theory, but we want to go back and look at those key decisions objectively. But scaling it and picking those moments will be the first year of the work that we do, is really the selecting what we're going to focus on, so that we don't waste, we have 3 years to really do the work. And that's going to go by very, very fast. And especially when you start layering the importance of the different perspectives, and looking at the war through the different lenses of all the practitioners, and some of the Afghans themselves. And so we're going to be somewhat methodical about how we pick our interviews. We're going to be somewhat methodical about how we do the document review. But there's a lot of work that's come before us. So we do get to stand on the shoulders of the studies and the folks that have already started on these types of projects.
I have one last recommendation.
Yes,
it
please.
seems like elevation is a big issue, going from someone who fought in Fallujah in Iraq versus Afghanistan. Have we considered flattening the country that we're going to be fighting in?
Just less high desert.
Yeah, that way, just sort of flatten the whole thing, and that way we can fight on even ground.
Joe, I'm happy to put that on the list of considerations.
Thank you.
I
think that might rise to the top, Joe. That's a really good
That's
one.
a good one. I'm onto something here.
Topography, Jamie, let's make that happen.
There are some things that will be true about Afghanistan only. There's some experiences that were so specific to that one country, and there are others that translate. There's a lot that translates between Iraq and Afghanistan. There's a lot that translates from Afghanistan to Ukraine, and there was a lot going into Afghanistan and Iraq that we learned from previous experiences. So we do have some previous high mountain experience, I think, as a country, and yes, it is a little bit easier on flat ground.
Well, I'm going to jump in here again. Just it gets me thinking a lot about, as a journalist, I do a lot of interviews and I talk to a lot of people, and I know this commission's going to be requiring to do a lot of that, like talking to different people. So my question is, you've got to figure out what key points, as you said, you're going to hone in on, and then you've got 3 years to do the research. Who's going to be arranging that for you? How will you decide what sources you're going to use, how credible are these sources, and then the interviews. How do you choose who to interview and who's going to be conducting these?
Yeah, those are great questions. So our commissioners have helped us work through breaking the topic into teams. And one of the things we're going to do is we will have 5, topical teams, thematic teams that the commission. One is going to be counterterrorism, and it's going to focus, based on what we've been asked to do in the mandate, on the counterterrorism initiatives and objectives in Afghanistan. One is going to be on conventional military and security force assistance. One of the key questions that Congress has is, why did the ANSF collapse as quickly as it did in the last year? Because we spent a lot of time on security force assistance and training and stabilization efforts. So we will have a team that looks at conventional military objectives and security force assistance. We're going to have a team that's going to look at the intelligence assessments. I think that's going to be a really interesting part of the study, to look at, the policy and the commanders digesting the intelligence assessments that were being delivered to them through the course of the war, and was that an effective relationship? Were they getting what they needed from the intelligence community? Was the intelligence community able to speak to truth to power, which is they're required to do? So we'll look at the intelligence assessments. We'll look at development. We spent a lot of money in Afghanistan on governance and the PRTs. So we have a team it's going to be focused on that. And then the one I think I'm most interested in from not having confronted in my previous jobs is the policy and diplomacy team. So there'll be a team that looks at the decision making at the presidential level and within the agencies, and also the diplomatic work that was being done. And so that's one of the ways that we'll make this task a little bit more digestible, is to sort of have these topical teams, but all of them will be working together to study the key moments. One example I give, the UBL early on in Tora Bora, Stacey, that you raised, is a really important one. But there's also an early Bonn conference where we set up a lot of the key objectives of the war with the international partners. And there were diplomatic objectives and development objectives all covered in that conference. And so we have to go back as a team and look at that and study it. On the interviews, there have been a lot of interviews that have already occurred. The ambassadors in particular have done oral interviews with their historians. And there have been some military specific studies. So the Army did an Afghanistan history study for the first 10 years of the war. So what we'll do on interviews is we'll look back and say, look at who's been interviewed and what, and use that as a resource, because we don't want to pull people in to ask the same questions that they've already responded to. And so we will prioritize folks where we need to get new perspectives that haven't previously answered those questions or been on the record on those questions. And we'll do everything from on the ground oral history perspectives to presidential decision making and cover that full scope. And we've talked internally about the numbers that we think and what we think is achievable in 3 years. The 9/11 Commission had an enormous number of interviews. I think they talked to 1,200 people. We do not expect to be able to execute that many substantive sit-down interviews in our scope, but we are going to talk to a lot of people.
Wow.
But I think it's remarkable, Jamie, and this is, just real plainly said, this is such a huge deal for so many reasons. And just kind of listening to you talk about how you guys are thinking about it, structuring it very methodically, very holistically and top to bottom. So I'm excited for that. I think when I was kind of looking and doing a little bit of research, something else that I was really excited to see was the helpful support that the Legion was able to provide to the commission with its resolution last May. And we'll have the link to it, but I thought, I would just read a little portion of it for the listeners for the context, and then I'll ask my question. So the American Legion fully endorses the creation and implementation of the Afghanistan War Commission for its statutory purpose, with the intent of utilizing lessons learned to inform future decision makers when U.S. forces may again be called upon to assist or intervene in weak states experiencing protracted instability or rebuilding after years of violence. And be it finally resolved that the American Legion recognizes the faithful and selfless service of the millions of service members, allies, and partners who served in Afghanistan. So this is really beautiful. I think it's a beautiful partnership. I think it really highlights what one of the core things that the Legion does and how it can support change in this country going forward. How do you maintain this momentum? How can Legion members take an active role in supporting you in this commission, which is so meaningful to us to be able to process and heal from this war? And so I guess my real question is, how do you engage veterans while building trust and transparency with this commission?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, we're deeply grateful to the Legion for their support for the creation of the commission. And I think the way that the Legion resolution emphasized the service as well as the importance of the review was really critical. So 800,000 plus service members did tours in Afghanistan. They did their jobs. They deserve answers to why the ultimate outcome was not what we wanted in that country. And I think it's really important that we as a commission treat veterans that served as one of our key customers of the work of the commission. And so the Legion support is really, really critical to ensure that people contribute and respond and answer the commission when we come asking questions about the decision making. We are creating a veterans portal. So our website is afghanistanwarcommission.org, and we want to hear veterans' key questions that they have about decisions made during the war. And so you can go to that website, and there will be a portal that veterans can ask their questions. We also have a chief outreach team that will be doing veterans outreach through the course of the war, because there's going to be the commission's study of the war. There's going to be moments where we want to tell some of those oral history stories and let veterans, we want to have those perspectives included in the final report. So we'll also be working to capture some veterans' experiences so we can include those in our final report as well. So both please feel free to task us on the questions that you have about the war. We value that exchange. And also, we will work on channels to tell some veteran stories about their service in the report to really capture for the average American the contributions of veterans.
Jaime, thank you so much for that. Personally, and with this show and anything that we can do to help spread the word and let people know that they can go there to put their questions in to help make sure that you're getting the full perspective.
I'll go ahead and send Andy over to do the
incredibly invaluable.
Yeah, we're all doing it right now, right? So I do want to flip the table a little bit on the three of you. And I know we started with a question about Tora Bora, but I am interested in your questions about the war and some of the things that in your conversations with other veterans that you've been discussing and sort of kicking around as some of the things that you want answered.
So I am so ready for this question. And the reason why is because I think that we have done a really poor job as a country of listening to ground troops, of really talking to boots on the ground. We have interviews by the dozens with generals and politicians. How many times do you have an E5 in front of a camera who saw the reality of what a policy had an effect on, both in combat and just in the military experience? An example would be ROEs, rules of engagement. These things directly affect these 18 to 25-year-old guys and gals running around with weapons in their hands. And I have not seen a single interview about ROEs that included any of these people. And I know they're afraid of having those people in front of the camera sometimes because some of those decisions have had consequences. So I think number one, you're going to be very surprised that some of the best questions you're going to get, whether, I don't know if you're going to have sources on the information, if people are going to be able to share who they are, if they even want to, but I think that very many of your very best questions are going to come from people that ran on the ground and did the work themselves. And
It's
go ahead, please.
Joe, it's so important to have those perspectives and what the war looked like from their perch, and the things that they were frustrated about and the things that they thought went well. There were some that may have felt like their mission and their time there was effective, and there may be some that were deeply frustrated about their time and their experience, and felt that they could see and point to things that could be changed or need to be addressed going forward. I think rules of engagement is a critical one. The risk calculus changed throughout the war, and we also had moments where we were working with the Afghan government about what was permissible for U.S. forces in country. And that led at certain times to a lot of, I think, frustration with folks on the ground about what they were permitted to do or not do in terms of their mission. So I think that's a really critical one. And you can't tell that story without looking at the ground troops' perspective of what it was like to execute those operations.
I think, especially considering all the best ideas in war probably come from like E3s and E4s,
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
you know, like, oh, you guys want to use IEDs? Perfect. Now our IEDs fly. So
right.
Thanks for the idea. We're going to make it better.
Yep.
But I appreciate that. That was something that I just wanted to point out, because that was a huge struggle early on, having dealt with the fall of Fallujah after having spent time there myself. It was very personal. I know many men and women that were deeply hurt by what felt like a failure on the part of everyone but us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, thank you.
And I think to translate it to Afghanistan in particular, you know, there were a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and lives went into providing security in Helmand and Kandahar and in Eastern Afghanistan. And that was at the, 18 to 22 year old level. And they took the brunt of those operations, and to see those, parts of the country kind of return to Taliban control, that is a deeply frustrating experience for those that had to go door to door and provide increased security in that area. So I feel particularly responsible for answering those young soldier and Marines and responding to their perspectives. Absolutely.
Well, I have a billion questions, so I'll just shut up, because I think I want Stacy, who's a little smarter than I am, probably has a more insightful questions other than flying IEDs.
Oh man, you really set me up now.
This better be good.
Well, okay, mine is a bit of an intellectual question, maybe philosophical, because we tend to look at the 20 years of direct combat in Afghanistan as being the war from start to end. But in meeting so many veterans through the Veterans Portrait Project, I've traveled to all 50 states. I've engaged with 8,500 veterans from all generations. And then I talk to veterans on the show. I talk to veterans through my television series, After Action. And what I've had resoundingly is that a war doesn't start and end just with the start date when we had boots on the ground and the day the boots left, because conflict reverberates, whether that's through mental health traumas, whether that's through people who are wounded, or whether that's through the impacts of toxic exposure. I think one question that I would have is, are we going to look at the long-term ramifications that conflicts like these have, Afghanistan in particular, to our country's finances in terms of some of the missteps we made in terms of burn pits or, engaging contractors for certain choices? I know, like in Vietnam, we had Agent Orange, but Afghanistan is our burn pits. So are we going to be looking at that, or are we just looking at boots that on the ground, boots left the ground?
Yeah, that's a great question. So within the specific mandate that Congress gave us, they asked us to look at the decisions related to the war from 2001 to 2021 and try to scope it the key decisions that led to the outcome of the war. I think we have a moral obligation as a country. Veterans carry their war service with them for the rest of their lives. And we as a country, as Americans, we need to hold those that serve sacred for the rest of their lives, because that war service never goes away. I mean, they take that with them. And I think for us, our focus will be to bring answers to veterans about the outcome of the war. And I think there is some catharsis in healing and having people asking those tough questions. And it does honor service to go back and do those deep forensic reviews and provide answers. And so that's how we as a commission will honor veteran service in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think the mental health stuff, I think particularly when they were, when the war came to an end in such an abrupt way, I think that definitely had a mental health impact. And, you know, that those feelings were already there. It's just that particular process, I think, triggered a lot of people, a lot of veterans particularly, and brought that back to the surface. Yeah.
One of my close mentors on House Armed Services Committee was a Vietnam veteran, an Army Ranger, and I worked with him when he was in his 60s, and we talked every single day about these types of questions, and he was still processing and still meeting with those he served with, and you know, he brought all of the lessons of his service to the committee on the importance of stand up of the professional all volunteer force, the importance of the country not abandoning service members when they return from really tough deployments, and supporting them, even if the policy of the country has changed, and thanking them for what they did. And I think that it's important to recognize that important cathartic conversation is going to be a lifelong conversation for most veterans.
I would say for me, Jamie, what I would recommend to the commission is how can you incorporate when you're trying to go back and do this thorough, detailed review to produce, you know, some information and answers and understanding these lessons learned. How can you do it with a heart-centered approach and compassion? Because I think that that's what the veteran community really wants to see, and especially myself and Stacy and Joe. You know, we work so much, pretty much dedicate our lives to veteran mental health and the outcomes from, you know, Afghanistan and Iraq. And so what veterans are really thinking is, why did we go over there and do the things that we did to come home and be treated and experience the military medical healthcare system the way that we are? And why did our leadership leave the way and the manner that they did? When we sit around and talk and look at it, makes no strategic sense whatsoever. And so there's a lot of trust that's being lost in our military and our veterans with our leadership because of that. And so I think we all know that. I think you guys know that that's a large part of it, and you're going to uncover a lot of things, you know, leading to that ultimate thing. But the question for the veteran right now is, why are we doing what we're doing to come home to what we're coming home to if our leadership is going to make those type of decisions and actions?
Yeah, I think it's a really important, really important point. We do intend to do this in an empathetic way. Our co-chairs, Shamila Chaudhry and Dr. Colin Jackson, have talked about this as the need to have cathartic conversations and empathetic conversations with sensitivity towards that trust issue that veterans have with being told this is the most critical national security mission, you know, defending the country against terrorism and preventing future 9/11 attacks. And this particular military objective, you know, is so critical to that effort, you know, only for 2 or 3 years later to be told, oh, we're okay, you know, no longer providing security in that region, and sort of changing the objectives. So I do think we have to look at the moral injury piece of the war. We have to be, you know, treat the subjects of the study with a certain amount of empathy, but answer the questions is really critical. And I am sensitive to the trust issue, and I know commissioners are sensitive to the trust issue. This was really considered the good war in the beginning, Afghanistan, and you know, the whole country was united behind the effort early on, and you know, the dynamics changed quite significantly by year 20. And we are going to look at the drawdown and the decisions going into the drawdown, because it's a really important part of the review. And hopefully that will help answer veterans' questions, and they can confront it with a little bit of the behind the scenes of what was going on at the time, and what the decision makers were grappling with at the time the decisions were being made, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, and I really appreciate you expanding, on the approach and how you guys are thinking about it, because I think that there's such an opportunity here to be able to inform future ways of how we operate and why. But you also highlight that it's just a really big opportunity to help our generation process those 2 decades and the world that we came back to after. And so I think it's so important what you're doing.
I will say this too, Jamie, I'm curious, my stepkids are military age. Like so many young Americans, they're choosing not to enlist. Many of them cite, particularly my stepchildren's generation, cite, well, we saw you leave for Iraq for umpteen numbers of years and months, and Afghanistan for umpteen numbers of years and months, and whatever came of that. So will this commission be writing a report that's going to be palatable and digestible for my children's generation to understand the complexities of what went into it? And how are we going to use this information and not just say, oh, we did our due diligence and we filed a report just like we did in Vietnam and everywhere else? How is this going to be different? How are we going to use your efforts? 3 years. I mean, that's a long time, and a whole heap of interviews and a whole heap of research. How are we going to make it worth our while?
So the first thing I want to say to your stepkids is the veteran service in Afghanistan, they did their jobs. It was honorable service. They accomplished what they were asked to do. And they deserve answers to why the ultimate outcome of the war was not in the U.S. interests. And I do think the report has to be digestible for the average American general public. This is not intended to be a security study, academic exercise for a narrow group of policymakers in DC. This is really intended to be written in a way that it's digestible and works through these concepts for the average American consumer. We think that's really important because I think one of the things that we are facing is the slight disconnect between the general public and veterans that served. And this report intends to address both audiences. And I think that you have to, some things did work. There were parts of the mission that worked. And if you look at the war through different lenses, counterterrorism, development, governance, all the different things that we were trying to do in that country, there were aspects that we don't want to stop doing going forward. And we don't want to take those missions off the shelf. We may have to go back in future conflicts and future interventions and use some of those tools. And so we don't want people to have strong aversions to public service and military service and the importance of what we need to do on national security objectives. And so I think the war study is intended to help solve some of those questions and make recommendations going forward of what to change. So next time we can hopefully have a more favorable outcome.
I just want to jump in here and say that if you are any indication of what we have to look forward to with this, then I'm very happy and very pleased. Your openness and your willingness to take these questions, which are not softball questions. These are hard questions from people that are emotionally invested in what we're doing here. These are our people. These are our veterans. I just want to say thank you for that. But I do want to say that it ties in a little bit with what both Stacy and Adam said, in that finding a way to maintain empathy while not using soft language, because that's one thing that pushes veterans away, is when you're afraid to say this didn't work, instead of saying, blah, 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 elements of success. And I think that direct language is going to be very important. And I think it helps both in palpability of people being able to comprehend this information properly. And also to show empathy through accountability. And not that everything went wrong and it's our fault, nothing like that. I just mean more, there were costs specifically related to these policies that didn't work, and this is what we want to do moving forward. That level of openness and that you have with us right now is how you build trust with veterans. The ability to take a question that is uncomfortable to ask and uncomfortable to answer, and to be able to give us an empathetic but direct answer, is exactly the type of conversation that veterans are looking for. And you've done a great job of that with us. It means a lot to me. Why is this an emotional conversation for me? I don't know, but I think it's just nice to have someone who will talk to you and doesn't float like a butterfly and sting you in the butt when you're not looking. It's I appreciate your openness and your candidness is what I'm getting at.
I appreciate you sharing your views on it, Joe. I think we use the term unflinching. Is unflinching the right direct? Yeah,
that's a great term.
And I think that's really important. If we don't have the hard conversations, what's the point? We don't intend to talk around the tough issues. And the instructions to our team is to do it in an unflinching way.
I would also just like to reflect what Joe said and just thank you, Jamie, for how you're showing up. These are some hard questions that we're talking about, and I appreciate you helping to share with us and also our listeners the explanation of the approach of how you're going to do this, and also incorporating our voices in the portal that you have to be able to do that. I think it's going to be so important to be able to gain that trust and transparency. And I do think that this is so incredibly important. And I think that you're so the right person for this.
Thank you, Adam. I really appreciate that.
Jamie, we really appreciate the time that you've given us today. Is there anything that you want to add or maybe we didn't cover before we sign off?
I think I just want to thank again the Legion for their work pushing Congress and helping be one of the instigators for the creation of the commission. And I want to keep that conversation going throughout the process of the 3 years. So please, veterans, alphas, please go to the Afghanistan War Commission.org. Please ask your questions of what you want answered, of decisions made during the war. And we will keep communicating with the veterans community throughout the process and capturing those stories and those perspectives. And I really appreciate everything you guys are doing.
Thanks. And alphas, hey, get out on that portal and have your voice heard. If Joe didn't answer the question or didn't ask a question right, fill in the blank for him. Go to the portal. In the meantime, thank you again, Jamie, for your time. We will have the Afghanistan War Commission's website linked into the show notes. And I'm going to pass it on over to Adam.
Jamie, thank you so much for visiting us today. Alpha, stick around for some scuttlebutt after the break.
Selfless service.
The American Legion celebrates all who contribute to something larger than themselves.
And inspires others to serve and strengthen America. We are veterans strengthening America. We are the American Legion.
Okay, Alphas, we hope you had a great break. Now it's time for some scuttlebutt.
Listen up, Alphas. The Military Women's Memorial needs your help right now. Every day, our nation loses more and more women veterans whose stories go undocumented, unarchived, and untold. Valuable history passes away with them. That's why MWM is hosting an Adopt the Woman Veteran project, and they need volunteers from across the country to join us. Those who sign up will receive resource packets that include articles, obituaries, and documents about the women veterans who are no longer with us. You will compile her information and submit her profile for inclusion at womensmemorial.org website. It's just that simple. There's just not enough staff and help at the memorial to be able to do all of this, and that's why they're asking for your support in helping transcribe these honorable women veteran stories And by doing so, you will be ensuring that future generations know what role women have played in our nation's history. Personally, I joined the MWM in 1998, shortly after they opened in Washington, D.C. My military story is already archived with them, as is my sister's, and any other women veteran that I come across. I encourage them to do it now. And if you're a woman who served, this is me asking you, dear Alphas, get online and register, get your stories archived. This incredible organization has a beautiful facility at Arlington National Cemetery, and it's all in honor of you. So be sure to make sure you make that pilgrimage if you're ever in the area. Encourage other women veterans to get their stories archived. In the meantime, please consider supporting that program, Adopt a Female Veteran, by visiting womensmemorial.org or emailing registration@womensmemorial.org.
All right. So the combat con artist of World War II or III, I think it's II. Okay. In late March, members of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, known as Ghost Army, were presented with the Congressional Gold Medal. The Ghost Army was the first mobile multimedia tactical deception unit in the U.S. Army history. With just 82 officers and 1,023 men, this unique top secret unit, I'm assuming it's not top secret anymore, was capable of simulating 2 whole divisions, approximately 30,000 men using visual, sonic, and radio deception. So the unit consisted of West Point graduates, artists, engineers, professional soldiers, and draftees, including famed artists such as designer Bill Blass, painter Ellsworth Kelly, and photographer Art Main. The unit waged war with inflatable tanks and vehicles, fake radio traffic, sound effects, and even phony generals, using imagination and illusion to trick the enemy while saving thousands of lives along the way. First of all, that's fascinating. When I was in Iraq, I was in Fallujah, I was invited actually to ride along with the PSYOPs guys, the Army PSYOPs guys as a Navy corpsman. And it was loony. I mean, we're riding around playing, everything from Outkast to Pink Floyd. And I mean, literally the whole goal is to bait out combatants. And when I agreed to ride with them for the day, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. But one thing I will say, it was a dangerous level of fun. It was a dangerous level of fun. So could you imagine that being your entire job? It's like, hey, I want you to go there and I want you to screw with as many people as you possibly can, create as much confusion as possible, mislead these people into thinking that there's dozens of people everywhere they look, and there's 30,000 men and women ready to just show up at any moment with fake generals. That alone sounds hilarious.
Well, I wonder if they recruited the inflatable tanks, if they recruited the balloon handlers from the Macy's Day Parade.
Oh, see, that would have been perfect. Because the only thing scarier than that is like a 600-foot big Pikachu, like that right there would really sow dissension in the troops. So, but following the war, the unit soldiers were sworn to secrecy, records were classified, and equipment was packed away. No one spoke publicly about the deceivers until a 1985 Smithsonian article broke the silence and was officially declassified in 1996. So what's hilarious about that is anybody who's ever had more than 3 or 4 friends, how do you keep that many people quiet? They either really had so much fun or we don't know the whole story. I bet there's some really hilarious stuff that happened and all that. But a 2013 documentary helped bring the story to a wider audience. And another decade of work by the Ghost Army Legacy Project eventually resulted in the legislation to honor the military units with the Congressional Gold Medal, which was signed into law by President Joe Biden in 2022. So 3 of the 7 known surviving members attended the ceremony. Bernard Bluestein, I don't want to mess that up, 100 of Hoffman Estates, Illinois, John Christman, 99 of Leesburg, New Jersey, and Seymour Nossenbaum, 100 of Monroe Township, New Jersey. I think they were just getting really good food and what to live to 100?
I mean, this feels like an episode of Cocoon. Like these guys must have been swimming in the waters.
Yeah, there's something special. I wonder if these people were, it's New Jersey. I guess we just moved to New Jersey and we'll live to be 100.
Right?
Nah. But I think this is amazing. Do you have anything to add to this, Adam?
Oh, I would just say that, I think what speaks to me is like the innovation and creativity to be able to use whatever you can, what available resources.
Yeah.
Was got artists, photographer, balloon designers, I mean, essentially actors, right? Doing the fake radio calls. And I just imagine, there has to be a level of, humor. You got to get ready and you perform, you do the transmissions, and then you're back there just laughing about it, being like, but then at the time, are you like, is this even working? How do you measure effectiveness? I mean, obviously it was, but even at the time, you just like, well, here the war's going on, and I'm just out here moving these balloons around around the fake
I was gonna
landscape.
say, how do you know it's effective when your balloon deflates from a gun, from a bullet,
That's true.
Yeah.
We're taking away the resources. They're shooting at balloons.
So I think it's pretty remarkable. It's a remarkable story. I think I maybe knew a little bit about it or heard it once before, but I didn't know the depth of the operation.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really cool that there were still some folks living that they were able to recognize that as well.
I think it's cool. And I think that I would have been good at it, good at the ideas and bad at the implementation of those ideas, because I would have laughed every time. Every single time. I would have had a great idea. I would have tried to act it out, and then I would have giggled at the end like a goofball. But if you do want to know more about the Ghost Army Legacy Project, you can check the show notes, and we have a link there that tells you a little bit more.
A recent post on Legion Town reminds us of how American Legion members always seem to be the first to step up and help their neighbors after a natural disaster. 2 posts in Tennessee have been spending the last few months doing just that. Back in December, a deadly outbreak of tornadoes tore through Clarksville, Tennessee, on a nearly 50-mile-long path. 4 people died, 61 were injured, thousands more were displaced when their homes were left without power, with major damage, and completely destroyed. In the aftermath of the storm, though, members of the American Legion stepped up to help their neighbors. CSM Gary W. Crisp, Post 289, and Linnell Williams, American Legion Post 143, joined forces to provide shelter, relief supplies, and helped at the City Emergency Center. Post 289 donated cots to Post 143 for a sleeping area in their building. Emergency buddy check teams went to physically check on all post members to offer support and supplies as needed. And Sons of the American Legion members joined forces with Legion riders to organize cleanup teams. National Emergency Fund grants were made available for qualified individuals, and Post 289 Commander Mark Maithes presented the local chapter of YAPIC Project Patriot Hope a check for $2,500 to help homeless veterans and tornado victims in the Clarksville area. Members of these posts continued to provide both physical and emotional support throughout the recovery process. What do you guys think? Pretty amazing.
I think that's incredible. I'm a huge supporter of supporters. Seems like a funny thing to say, but for instance, when I see people struggling with grace, that's like my soft spot in movies. When I see somebody that is pushing and all, it seems like the whole world is against them. And I tell you what, when you're really at your most vulnerable and somebody shows up to help, there's an immediate bond there that is untouchable. When I got hurt, the organizations that were there for me, I'll never forget those people. And I know that the organization behind it is where the money comes from, but the spirit of giving is in people who work in nonprofits and people who get involved with their communities. I love supporting supporters. I love doing what I can to make somebody whose heart is in giving have an easier time of doing something, to help other people around them.
Yeah. Well, I first and foremost, I hope the people up there in Tennessee are feeling better. They're, getting their stuff in order and getting kind of back to, pre-catastrophe normal. And thanks to the Legionnaires who really stepped up, not just monetarily, but I mean, some of the biggest hurdles to get over after storms like that. And I live in South Carolina, where tornadoes are tornadoes and hurricanes mainly, can really wreak havoc, and having help with cleanup is huge. And so, those Legion riders and those Sons of the American Legion stepping up to help get things right was really, really big. So Bravo Zulu to you guys.
I think for me, this story really shows the spirit of the Legion and how when things are challenging or there's a struggle or a disaster and people are in need, our willingness to bring our organization to come together, to assemble, and like you were saying, Joe, to serve and to help out. And I think that, you know, as humans, as veterans, we all experience hardships. We all experience struggles and challenges. Sometimes they're through a natural disaster, but let's just be honest, like, you know, being human is hard. And so I think the message here is that it's not the adversity that defines you, that you experience, but it's what and it's how you show up in the face of adversity. And this is such a great example of showing up in service to others. So thanks to Ernest Smith for submitting that story to Legion Town, and thanks to the Legion family in Clarksville for really stepping up. And we'll have links in our show notes for more information about the National Emergency Fund and links where you can submit your own story to Legion Town.
All right, Alphas, thanks for listening. You can subscribe to our podcast, our newsletter, and send us mail and guest recommendations at legion.org/Tango Alpha Lima. We'll see you next week.